Welcome to the Untold History Channel. Rod Partain here. It is Tuesday, April the 14th, 2 days after the anniversary of the death of the United States, the inauguration of civil war on Fort Sumter. So
What war?
The War of Northern Aggression.
Oh, yeah, okay. I
The
didn't recognize by that other name.
The first American imperialistic war, but is that true? Because was not the Mexican-American War also imperialist?
And
Not necessarily.
That's a good. It's debatable, right? Fair.
yeah, it's debatable. But definitely, I maintain that the war between the states was more an elite mechanism to destroy the state sovereignty movement than it was more of a central, to get the government centralized than it was about anything other than that. But that's just
I think that's fair.
Yeah, it was economic. We started out as we had two different economies. You had the maritime economy of the Northeast. You had the agrarian economy of the South, and the two had different goals and needs, and that they could not coexist. Eventually always going to happen.
Right.
And remember, I tend to take this point of view. I try not to be too binary about things because there's always factions that are not guilty and so on and so forth. So we have to, I hear often, well, the United States did this. Well, no, a segment of the government was behind it, and there were others that were not. So.
Exactly.
But in this case, both parties were kind of actually. It's funny because people talk about the flipping of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, but the flip is not what they claim. It's a different flip.
Exactly.
And back then, the States' Rights Party was the Democrats, and the centralized everything party was the Republicans. But and then during the Progressive era, they were both quote unquote progressive. So. There's the changing, and it's like the Republican Party. My entire life, I was never really fully and many parts of it, but now that MAGA's there's it's now you got kind of a
my defense, and this isn't really a defense of the Democrat Party, but my defense of the Democrat Party is the Democrat Party of today, and that happened post war between the states is not the same Democrat Party that was there before the war, because that Democrat Party, which was the Jeffersonian Republican Democrat Party that got shortened to Democrat Party, if I remember correctly, or maybe I'm getting my
originally it was the Republican Party, then became the Democratic Republican, and then finally the Democrat.
Right.
Yeah. Let me jump in here real quick.
And hang on, because I was going to say something too. You're generally right, Ron, but there is an element that the Democrats have always been pushing from day one that's not changed, and that is more democracy.
So here, let me just extrapolate on what you're saying. You guys aren't saying anything wrong, but there was not two parties in the election of 1860. There were four.
Right.
You had the Northern Democrats, you had the Southern Democrats, you had the brand new Republican Party, and you had it was the Free Something Party, which was the remnants of the Whigs who just recently died out. Right. There were four parties contesting in 1860. The Republicans
win with the Free Soil Party, and the Free Soil Party also had a lot of the know-nothings in there. And
yeah. Well, the interesting part about that is, Lincoln wins with 41% of the vote. He wins the Electoral College, and then you have single-party rule in D.C. that nationalized the government and declared war on their previous co-equal states. That's what really happened. But it was, if any of the other three parties had won, there would have been no war. Everybody at the time knew that if the Republicans won, there was going to be war. That was not a secret at all. The book you really want to read to know the details of this is called The Election of 1860. I've got it right over there. Yeah, it's a fantastic book.
Yeah. Well, and if there had not been a Missouri Compromise, there would have been no war as well. I mean, there's a lot of things that happened along the way that led to what happened. There's a number of components that led to it. The Missouri Compromise, the
tariff abominations. But
the
I brought up,
tariff, there's and I was getting ready to say, and the Compromise of 1850. I mean, there's a number of mechanisms that just led them down the road to that, and it became inevitable.
So I brought up the Maritime Empire as a way to segue into what we're talking about tonight, because we are going to be talking about maritime empires, and
partly, absolutely.
I was trying to tee you up.
Yeah, I want to make sure we pick up where we left off. I don't want to be skipping anything, but not that this is not a good conversation.
Right.
And folks that are listening live, feel free to be in the chat. I do pay attention to it. I am in there. I try to pay attention to who's typing what.
My feeling is that April 12th of 1861 is a date that is really in infamy that people just have kind of forgotten about.
Yes. Now, that said, I want to make a quick announcement or two real quick to this audience. I'm going to be making, this is the first audience to hear this. I'm going to be making to all of my audiences. Today, I began the process of eliminating my contract with Salem Media in San Diego. I've got 4 weeks left of 4 episodes left on KCBQ and KPRZ. We're just not getting the funding. I've lost, for the most part, my main advertiser there. My other advertiser, KMET, is retiring. So that last episode will be the last Saturday before July 4th. So
KMET's going under?
No, I am. I'm no longer going to be there. My advertising, I have no funding for it. No, gotcha. KMET, they'll live on without me. But it's just after 15 years on AM and FM radio, I guess you could say in many sense I'm a terrestrial radio veteran. I am ending those contracts because it's just gotten the point where I don't have the funding between advertiser sponsors. And what I used to do is the shortfall from the advertisers, what remained, I made up with my classes. I don't teach classes anymore either. So there's, we've the income from what I did is about 1/6. That's 1/6 compared to what it was when I was in Southern California. Can't operate like that. So just for those of you who listen to radio shows. Now, that said, that does not mean the shows are over. I am migrating them to Rumble. I'm gonna do them live. We're gonna do chat room. I'm gonna learn to do kind of the way you're doing here. And the other interesting piece of news is Patriots Soapbox. I have been with Patriots Soapbox for years. D Live, which was their primary platform, is going the way of Skype, and so they have migrated over to Rumble.
D Live's going away too.
Yeah, they just announced it last week.
Yeah, wow. and so now the primary location for Patriot Soapbox is Rumble. So basically what I'm getting at is all of my shows, even my radio shows of Patriot Soapbox, just go to Rumble. You'll find.
Is there anything that you talk about on Patriot Soapbox and Rumble that you can't say on YouTube?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, matter of fact, the number of YouTube videos I have had canceled, I'm surprised they haven't canceled my whole account.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've only gotten one strike on YouTube, and I put almost every single video I've ever done out there. And the one strike I got was I was doing guest hosting for Doug on Patriot Soapbox, and I had Michael Ray Curry on, and we got nuked quickly. Michael's the guy who did the Erickson report, and he's really tied Sweden into the entire deep state stuff. But he didn't last more than 2 hours on YouTube.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I'm amazed. I've had 6 videos shut down just because of my discussions regarding natural born citizenship or the citizenship clause.
You know, it's funny. We did natural born citizen on my channel, and it's still up on YouTube.
Really? I've had 3 of them where I've even mentioned natural born citizenship. But see, did you indicate certain persons were not eligible?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, because I did too. And they
well, you co-hosted that one with me.
Now, one of mine that I got shut down that was hilarious was an event I did in Lake Havasu, and I was talking about Boston and these patriots that fought the war, and and so on and so forth.
I was
they
watching
shut down saying I was using NFL copyright names.
I was watching that live when it happened.
So
They said you were using NFL copyright names.
Yeah, because I said things like Patriots and Boston.
Are you
and
freaking kidding me?
And then when I fought them, they said, "Oh, it's the algorithm." I'm like,
yeah, right. My algorithm, my ass.
Well, and the thing is, during that particular video, I hammered on Reynolds v. Sims quite a bit. I think that's what really pissed him off. But
again, my Reynolds v. Sims videos haven't been touched by YouTube.
Yeah,
I actually doubt.
You apparently have a face that doesn't look threatening, and I do. That's got to be what it is.
Doug, you were the co-host on those videos when I did Reynolds v. Sims.
So why are mine getting shut down?
I doubt Reynolds v. Sims had that much impact, but
you never know.
Never. I mean, it's probably something else from before, and it just lingered, and so they were just looking for a reason. But whatever, I digress.
Now, my old Blogger website, Blogger, which is owned by Google, they've shut down every single page. And you got to realize, I used to advertise my Constitution, my classes on that blog. Every time, every single, not just some, every last one of the posts in which I put my lesson plan for the war between the states lesson, Reconstruction Amendments, all of them have been unpublished by Blogger.
Really?
Yes. They've left all the other ones alone, but those have all been
That is very telling. That is very telling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost as if they don't want the information of our founding and how our founding fathers thought to be heard.
Well, you got to remember, from their point of view, you're not supposed to know any history before the Reconstruction period anyway.
This is very true. This is very true.
Yeah, speaking of history before the Reconstruction period.
Yeah.
Hey,
are you talking to me? You talking to me?
Three of us who love history, love the Constitution, like to talk. What could go wrong?
Nothing. But let's get back to the pre-colonial America.
Yeah. Well, when we
had
last left off, I was.
But I just wanted to say that I mean, I was told at the very, very last second that today was baseball cap day, so I had to represent my world champion. Dodgers.
I'm just excited that the Angels are only one game under 500 right now.
Ron, I'm representing my world champion.
That's a win in of itself.
You see the world champion I'm wearing?
Yes, that's a Trump, and he is a world champion.
Well,
I listened to the Colonel on on Tim's podcast last night. Her and Susan Kukinda. I wanted to ask you actually, Brady. Because they're big LaRouche guys, and they're obviously they're big Hamiltonian guys, and I'm not one that is so myopic that I just think that Hamilton was an absolute just horrible person. I just disagree. I fundamentally disagree with some of his concepts, but I understand that that he wasn't 100% wrong in everything that he was saying.
Well, the problem is we look at the world as a binary universe.
That's right.
And the Promethean action people are basically talking about national economic nationalism, like Lincoln and like Hamilton did, the American system versus the international system, which is basically communism. But there's a third option we never really got a chance to try, and that's free and fair markets where the government stays the hell out of our business. And that's the side we're all on. Promethean action never considers that. Hamilton and Lincoln's never gave us a chance to live that. But that's not quite true, because we had two economies in the 1800s in America. You had basically the American system, which is mercantilism on the East Coast. But as we were expanding westward to the States, you had actual free markets. And you had this is where the massive buildup in the middle class came from, was the westward expansion, because the government stayed the hell out of our business.
Right.
Here's the difference. Their crony capitalist system, which Lincoln took into overdrive, with his federally funded internal improvements, which basically meant the building taxpayers paying for the railroads, which is why they invaded the South, because they needed those tax dollars. That's how we created the robber barons and the greatest wealth disparity in American history. The robber barons then became so wealthy generationally, they hid behind tax-free foundations and created all the institutions that are running our universities, the NGOs, everything like that. That all comes from the money earned in that era on the back of our taxpayer. That's who we're fighting against because they became the globalists. So Trump's fighting that is economic nationalism, but I don't like Trump's economic nationalism. It's just better than the alternative. There's a third way. And that's the problem with Promethean Action and the Larouchians is they very much want a mercantilist system, but it's America first. And that's why they're so good. They're well-funded, and they're very good on most topics. Susan's very sharp.
Yes.
I just disagree on this one fundamental issue.
Well, considering Trump's actions, Trump understands something, and I think we all understand this, is what we want is a true free market, but you can't just go there. It's steps. And so his is a step in that direction.
Well, his stuff is the stuff.
I would hope it isn't permanent. I'd hope it's a temporary step until we go to the next step closer. But then again, you've got to have more people like him in the future.
Well, that's why so many people, some of the base is getting ticked off, besides the obvious reasons of, shills and plants and paid influencers. But legitimately, Trump is not, his version of America first is to grow America's GDP, decrease the trade deficit, and protect the dollar. That doesn't trickle down to Main Street for a number of years, and people are ticked off about that. What we're talking about, that's not what we don't want. We don't want economic nationalism. We want to get rid of the internationalism, get rid of the cronyism, and let's have free markets. And that's where the split is with somewhat in Trump's base economically. And you're seeing it play out in real time.
Again, I believe his is a step in the direction we want. Whether or not he sees it as that, I don't know. But I'm not saying he necessarily does.
I don't
think
he does.
It is a step away from what it's been.
Yeah. So what he's doing, what his international policies have been doing, and you look at Venezuela, you look at Cuba, you look at China, you look at Iran, they're all Chinese allies. He's basically disrupting the rules-based economic order that from post-World War II, after Bretton Woods. He's dismantling that in real time, which is great.
And that is straight out communism. It's like when people start going after the tariffs, and I tried to explain to them, don't you understand what he's doing there? The way the tariffs were, that was a classic redistribution of wealth. He is literally dismantling global communism in the way he's doing it. Again, I agree with you 1000%. What I would like us to eventually get to, and on the same token, I recognize what he's doing, and baby steps. Everything's a process, and the process will never end because the moment you think you're starting to gain, you will lose. The moment you think you're losing, you may get some gains. Unfortunately, that's just humanity. That's just human nature and the process.
I came to a realization. I don't know. It was kind of an epiphany. I was listening to something, and it said, we're never, ever, ever going to win this. You guys people think that we're going to win this, right? And they're looking at it as a destination. And it's like they don't recognize that this is not a destination. It is a continuous journey. And the very best that you can hope for is to be as high up and to have as big of a disparity between victory and defeat as possible and maintain that disparity.
Right. Well, I have said that to my
Niagara Falls.
I'm sorry.
Do your Niagara Falls analogy.
It's my Niagara Falls. And I've been telling people it's a war. It is a battle and a war we can never win, but we must never lose. And is one of the terms I use and one of the examples I use. Thank you, Warhamster. You and I were thinking on the exact same wavelength on that one. And one of the examples I use is it's like we're this giant yellow raft on the Niagara Falls, or on Niagara River, I mean. And sometimes we get so close to the falls, we can hear the roar. We can even see the sign that says, the point of no return. And that sign is on the Niagara River. If you pass that sign, it doesn't matter how good of a swimmer you are, how good of a motor you have, how good of a rower you are, you're going over the falls. Of course, when I tell the story, I like to joke and say we're so close to that sign right now that we can even read the small print, made in China. But but we're rowing in the opposite direction, and every once in a while we get so far away we can't hear the falls anymore. And our problem is we get excited, we throw our hands up, we drop the oars, and then that current that's under the boat never stops, never rests. It always pushes us towards the falls, and that current will always be there. We will always be fighting against that current. We will never win, but we must always row. And we must not only always row, because eventually our arms will get tired. We've got to hand the oars over to the next generation, but they don't need to just row. They need to know why so that they keep rowing. And we've been doing very poorly when it comes to handing off that baton.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my way of saying I agree with you 1,000% on what you're saying about, this is not something we can necessarily win. It is a quiet chat tonight. I noticed that myself.
Nah, it's okay.
There are people there. I mean,
I'll be honest. I haven't. This is like the first broadcast I've done in almost a week. I haven't really done much. I've really been trying to refocus my efforts on getting my computer system up with my AI and my RAG system. A lot of things that have really kind of taken me away from doing the. I know I've been talking about that, but I've really kind of like sat down, and it's like it's not that it's difficult. It's just time consuming because it's about doing a whole bunch of coding that I have never done before, and I've never, this is all I'm learning on the fly, and it didn't help. It didn't help that I had two machines. I got one machine, and then I put everything on that, and then I switched the machines, and then when I did that, I had to kind of start all over again. So, but the cool thing is that I've got multiple machines now working and doing things. So anyway, I'm getting I'm getting closer, but this has been a much longer endeavor than I really anticipated.
Well, as I'm moving on, I've been plugging this show and my podcast, where my radio show's been going a lot more. And the numbers on the radio shows, unfortunately, now I'm letting them go on podcast platforms, have been growing like crazy. Unfortunately, I just can't keep them. But
you know what?
To get back what you were saying, because you mentioned AI, I have a love-hate relationship with AI. When it comes to like talking to certain AIs, or like the one where you call in and you got to press 1 for English or whatever, but it's an AI, and so it wants to hear it, and then it won't let you talk to a human unless it can figure out what your problem is. I hate those things. They never work with me. They always send me into some type of lonely hell that circles me back in some loop or something.
I guess
a
circle jerk.
Yeah, but I wouldn't call it that. But but at the same time, AI has also become a valuable tool. One of my biggest challenges for my websites is I've been really trying to teach myself to get good at putting tags out, because tags are important for whenever I write and all that. And I'll sit there for all this time doing this big long list of tags, and then every once in a while, I don't know what it is programming on my website. Every once in a while, I'll get almost done, and then suddenly they'll all vanish, and I got to start all over again. But then I got to realizing, why am I coming up with all these tags? So I actually started doing this yesterday. So I download my article to the AI and say, I need a bunch of tags that are going to be noticed by search engines. I need commas after each of them, no spaces in front and after, and at least one of them has to be political pistachio. Uh-huh. And it's given me not only a list of tags I would do, but ones I didn't even think of.
Right.
Like, why have I not thought of this before? So AI is a wonderful tool in many ways. But anyway, so
enough of that. Let's get into the age of exploration, because
so where we had left off is I was talking about other world powers that had been to America before, and we had left off with the Russians, and because they're right on the other side, Kamchatka and Alaska, not too far from each other, kind of thing. And so Russia had actually had quite a bit of land that it held in North America, northern Pacific coast, and especially from like 1732 to 1867, hunting in Siberia, the furs from animals available in Russia now, or Siberia, here in the North America, suddenly they've got all these new furs and, so on and so forth. So basically, Russian expansion went from like Alaska, the Western Canadian, what today's West Canadian coast, the Pacific Northwest. In fact, just north of San Francisco, there's some former Russian, colonies and forts and things like that. and Bering's, you go back to Bering's voyage to North America's mainland in 1741, which ushered in an increase in colonization that found the Russians occupying vast lands, mostly in Alaska. And then in 1808, Russia moved its capital of Russian America southward from Kodiak down into Northern California, Fort Ross, which was built in 1812. And I've been to Fort Ross, and it's a fascinating, place, although there's not a whole lot left of it. But they were unable to compete with the British and the Spanish and the American interests in the region during the middle of the 19th century, plagued by periodic Native American revolts, facing devastating ramifications from the Crimean War, during the 1850s.
Crimean.
Russia. So
if I might add, Doug, the other issue with Russia is they lacked a warm water port, which is one of the reasons they fought the Crimean War. But that was remember we talked about the agrarian empires versus the maritime. Yeah. Russia was a land-based empire they did a pretty good job of competing, but they just had a natural uphill battle because of the lack of warm water ports.
Right, exactly. So they wound up giving up pretty much all of their North American colonies except for Alaska early on, giving up selling Fort Ross in 1842 to American John Sutter after Britain and Mexico rejected the offer for an unsecured note of $30,000, of which it has been written that Sutter never paid.
Britain rejected it?
Yeah, Britain rejected it.
I didn't know they offered it to Britain.
Yeah,
I thought they gave us Alaska to keep.
No, not Alaska. I'm talking Fort Ross.
I know that, but I'm saying I thought they gave. I thought they made sure that we got Alaska to make sure that it was out of British hands.
Well, by then, yeah, but in the 1840s, they weren't as concerned about Britain. But nonetheless, 1867, we wound up buying Alaska for $7.2 million, and that pretty much ended Russia's colonial presence in the Americas at all. But anyway, so that was, and we had talked about the Chinese and the Vikings, and even a possibility of visit from Mali when it came to North America. So when we talk about Columbus discovering America, yes, technically he did not, but for his era, he did. I mean, the history, the everybody knowing who's doing what and all that. They didn't live in an information age like we do.
The Vikings were there first,
right? Well, some may argue the Chinese, but there's once again, and in the end, I really don't care. In the end, ultimately, North America, which you got to remember when his generation didn't know really all the details about all of these visitations. They didn't even know there was a landmass between Europe and the Orient going west. Man, they just thought it's such a huge ocean, and there's no way anybody could go that far and not and without some type of supply depot or stopping somewhere. There's no way they would survive such a long trip. And this all started because of trade with the Far East, India and China. And so the Venetians had made a deal with Islam to pretty much only let them use the land route. And Islam was pretty much killing anybody who tried to use the land route through there anyway.
That's the remnants. That's the leftover of the old Chinese Silk Road.
Yeah. And so if you wanted to trade, you had to find some other way of doing it. So the Portuguese are like, well, let's even though it's a long trip, and at this time, remember, they don't have the same kind of technology, shipbuilding, so on and so forth. But let's go around the Horn of Africa and see if we can do it that way. So Bartholomew Diaz, Portuguese captain, understanding that our land route to the Far East was not only treacherous due to the many obstacles associated with travel by land, but you got the Muslim countries and all that. We can't afford all the tributes. Pay all the tributes on the way. You make nothing by the time you get there. So historically, and once again, like I said, the Muslims had only been willing to work with Venetian commercial interests, and so the Portuguese decided the way to go east was to sail around the southern tip of Africa. And so while not the first sailor from Portugal to make the attempt. Diaz was the first to get around the Cape of Good Hope successfully, and then he turned northward toward India in 1497, but he never made it there. Another Portuguese captain, Vasco da Gama, did make it to India in 1498, returning to Portugal with a rich cargo of spices. So, and what Portugal wound up doing is that path became theirs, and they created an empire along the African coast and engaged in trade with the Far East. So Spain's like, okay, our neighbor here on the same peninsula is pulling this off. Meanwhile, you've got Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, two of the largest dominions of Spain, uniting under their marriage of 1469. And Spain was like a bunch of little dominions, and they had been at war for years trying to rid Spain of the Muslim presence by the Moors. And they had a hope to move a newly united Spain into a realm of power that Portugal was achieving.
Can I ask you a question? Do you guys remember the movie I think it's called True Romance with Christian Slater, and there was a scene in there where his dad was I think it was played by I can't remember the guy's name, but anyway, it's a famous movie scene where it's a cameo appearance by Christopher Walken, where he interrogates this guy, and he's like he's like, yeah, you're Sicilian, right? Yeah, okay, well, Sicilians were spawned by the N-word, right? And he looks at him, he's like, what? And anyway, the point is, he said that the Moors went up into Europe, and he said they did so much, and these are his words. He said they did so much fucking that even today that N gene still is present in Europe.
Absolutely.
Now, okay.
I've heard that before. Yeah.
Okay. So
but that's what they do too. That's what Islam does.
But it's
kill the men, impregnate the women.
Right.
And if you can't kill the men, still impregnate the women.
So, and he said that's why he says that's why you when you look at the Spanish and the Italians, that's why they have like they're not it's not necessarily black skin, but it's like
olive
it's a more olive,
olive skin and dark hair. Yeah.
Okay, now do Genghis Khan.
Yeah, well, I've heard Genghis Khan was
all of us probably have Genghis Khan.
I've heard Genghis Khan was about as Irish as looked about as Irish as could be, red hair and all kinds, But
he never invaded Ireland. He never invaded Germany. So I am free of Genghis Khan genealogy.
No, but the people he did invaded eventually immigrated there and mixed with so I guarantee you it's in there somewhere.
I'm a pureblood, Doug. I'm a pureblood.
So thought my great grandfather, who was pureblood Blackfoot. But there was so many. But from what we're understanding, there's so many things mixed in his blood.
So I didn't know you were related to Elizabeth Warren.
The Kalergi plan goes back thousands of years.
Funny.
Oh, Ron, are you ready for this?
Go ahead.
The Kalergi plan,
yeah,
which we all know is real. Kalergi never said that.
Who did?
Well, other people took some of his writings and implemented. Pretty much the Fabian socialists are the ones who adopted it. But Kalergi never wrote what we've learned over the last decade. I just found this out last week. Look it up. Go to your favorite AI. Kalergi never wrote that. It's misinterpreted.
Forgive me if I'm going to be skeptical if an AI is going to tell me that Kalergi didn't write it.
Well, because as you well know, when I go to the AI, I go to this. I ask them for original sources, and I go check them out, and it just happens to be correct. See if I can find it for you real quick.
That's interesting. I'd never heard that, but why would that? I mean, Kalergi was basically he was like he was like a eugenicist of the day.
Well, let me read this paragraph. To you.
Go ahead.
The whole idea of the Kalergi plan, it distorts a single passage from Kalergi's 1925 book, Practical Idealism, where he philosophically speculated in a futuristic, non-prescriptive way that technological and social trends might lead to a mixed race, and this is in quotes, race of the future, resembling ancient Egyptians. He did not propose any policy, plot, or plan for immigration-driven replacement. The term Kalergi Plan itself was invented decades later, popularized in the early 2000s by people like Gerd Honsick, who's described as a neo-Nazi, but you can take that with a grain of salt. And blah, blah. There's one more paragraph. His actual work. He advocated for a voluntary democratic federation of European states, a United States of Europe, to prevent wars.
An EU.
Well, yes, and that's the same thing that one of the things I'll be going over with the Colonel as we get to the institutions is Carnegie, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which I call the Endowment for International War, right. 1911.
Yeah, whatever
the whole idea for international peace was the destruction of the nation state and move on to one world government.
That's right.
Kalergi was more of a federalist than that. He talked about ideas like customs union, common currency, and parliament. You're talking EU, basically. Concepts that later influenced the World War II European project, etc. He emphasized peace, economic cooperation, and cultural absorption, not demographic engineering or genocide. Historians, his biographers, and fact checkers across sources confirm there is zero evidence of any such replacement scheme.
Interesting. Well,
yeah, man, love that. I just learned that last week.
You just threw me a curveball there, so I'm gonna have to. But what you're saying is that there were people who saw things that he talked about, twisted them, contorted them, and then implemented them and their own vision.
Yeah, there's no doubt there's no doubt, Ron, that what we call the Kalergi Plan has been enacted. It just wasn't his plan.
Gotcha. It was hijacked and blamed on him, even though it wasn't him.
Mm-hmm.
That's a common occurrence in history, over and over with many things. That's what happens often. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Two of us could go up, give a dozen examples of that in the next 2 minutes if we wanted to. But yeah.
All right. I would really like to do a show with you two about what we talked about at the very outset about the death of the United States and how it coincided with, or with like the major decline and how it started as a result of the inauguration of the war between the states. I think that would be
when we get to the war between the states, I think that's exactly what we're going to talk about in many ways.
Well, I mean, the only reason I wanted to do it relatively soon is
you're talking its own separate.
Well, no, I mean April 12th was the anniversary, so that was it was like
so right around April 12th next year. We'll probably get there. No,
no shit at our pace.
Well, hey, just ask Warhamster how long we've been working on Madison's notes. So. So I was talking about Ferdinand and Isabella, right?
What's that?
And I was talking about Ferdinand and Isabella in Spain. I'm getting ready to start talking about an individual. So if we have any left-hard listeners right now, they're going to disconnect right after I say this. Because, see, Ferdinand and Isabella trying to unite Spain, trying to get rid of the Muslim presence. They wanted to move a united Spain into a realm of power that Portugal was achieving. So in 1492, here's the name coming up that's going to make all the libtards leave. An Italian explorer, and actually Genoese, Christopher Columbus, approached them. Said, hey, I've got a proposition. Well, see, the Italians, Genoa didn't want anything to do with it. So he decided, well, this is my opportunity. So he offered to sail west in the hopes of finding passage to the Far East that was faster and less costly than the route the Portuguese were using. Now, Spain's like, oh, we're competing with Portuguese. Okay, keep talking. We like this. And more specifically, this is a faster way to get to Japan and China. So many sailors of the day had regarded the vast Atlantic to the west as being a sea of darkness full of dreadful monsters. And Columbus didn't fear the voyage and was willing to go so far out of the sight of land. And like I was saying earlier, from their point of view, there was nothing in the way. It was just, huge ocean. So Ferdinand and Isabella accepted the challenge. They funded the voyage. 3 small ships, the Nina, Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Now, a lot of people don't know some details about those ships. The Santa Maria was the largest and the newest, and it had 40 crew. It had been built in 1480. Remember, this is 1492, so it's a relatively young ship. It's 12 years old. The Pinta had been built in 1441. It was a much older ship, a little bit smaller. Its crew was 26 men. And then the Nina was an even smaller ship, and it was built in 1425. So understand that they're using a 65-year-old ship in the case of that one. It'd been around a while. Had a lot of miles.
Yeah, but that's not. I mean, that's
they took good care of them. But understand, and it had about 20 men.
I'm just saying something is 65 years old in the 1400s is a whole lot different than saying it's 65 years old in 2025.
Well, I'm not talking computers where you need a new one every 2 years, but yeah, I know what you mean.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but still,
there's talking about age now is different than talking about age then, because they built things to last back then.
Well, this is true. I don't debate that at all. Go ahead, sir.
Refrigerators used to last 30 years. They don't do that anymore.
No, I know. Well, things are not made to last. Things are made to be things are made to last a certain amount of time and then be repurchased.
Yeah. Planned obsolescence.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you got these 3 boats, these ships, and Columbus departed from Spain August 3rd, 1492. September 6th, he arrived at the Canary Islands just off the coast of Northwest Africa. Then he pointed west into the wide and unknown Atlantic. He believed that the Earth was smaller than its actual size. Columbus figured the journey to Asia would be a relatively short jaunt, longer than other sea passages they had taken, but shorter than what it really was in the sense of distance. And he figured there was probably some islands available to visit along the way. And so any land between Spain and the Far East would be a welcome sight. When it came to replenishing, depleted supplies, food, water, breaking up the arduous days at sea, stand on some land, whatever. But after many days passed, strong winds at their backs, they were moving quickly. They thought they were. The sailors who made up the cruise, that was a little less than 90 men in total, began to wonder if they could return against those winds. Even open mutiny became a constant threat. Columbus kept his crews under control with promises of the wealth they would gain once land finally appeared. October 12th, land finally was spotted by the 3 small ships, and Columbus named it San Salvador. Shortly after, many other islands were discovered until he finally landed on the very large island of Cuba. He sent out messengers in search for the Emperor of China, of which he was convinced he must be near. Understand, when Columbus died, he never realized that he had encountered something between Europe and Asia. He thought that he had been hitting the islands just outside of China. He was convinced that China was near when he was hitting these islands. And then when they departed in disappointment when the emperor, cities of gold, spices were nowhere to be found. Now, Spain rejoiced after Columbus's return, though he made, like I said, 3 other voyages. A total of 4 voyagers discovering other islands in what we now call the West Indies, parts of South and Central America. But he failed to gain the riches he had hoped for or the wealth he had promised his followers. And so, as a result, his unpopularity grew. And at one point, he became treated like a common prisoner. He died believing he had been traveling to islands off the coast of Asia, never realizing that he had started a chain of events that would lead to the vast exploration of the New World. His hope for riches never came to realization, but for Ferdinand and Isabella, Columbus began an era of vigorous colonial activity in America that would lead to great prosperity and imperial supremacy for Spain, and Spain would then become the great power of the world. This is before Britain, did their thing and all that. Understand, though, that there's a difference between the Spanish exploration and something like the English exploration. The Spanish were there to conquer, pillage, take. They weren't really looking for colonization the same ways that the British would do it later.
Well, let me jump in there because you're making a point that I've been hammering home quite a bit in my shows with Colonel Towner the last few weeks.
All right.
And I 100% agree. But you're skipping over the Dutch. And
no, I ain't skipping them. I just haven't gotten to them yet, but go ahead.
Well, you jump to the British, and because the Dutch are the ones who you're going to tell what the British did about actually establishing commerce and colonies that actually are productive. The Dutch did it first. So 100 years earlier. So it's an important point.
Yeah, but the Dutch wound up not being nearly as successful, and there's
there's
a number of stories as to why.
I will say I would make the case the Dutch were more successful. They just couldn't sustain it because they were smaller, and like every empire,
they were more successful because they did it in a different way. Rather than hold the colonies, they held seas. They became a maritime power.
But they did hold colonies. And they
just not like the British did, but yeah, and
most of those colonies, it's the same business model, is what I'm saying. And the difference you make between let's go in there, conquer, and extract the gold and take it home is a lot different than going and colonizing and building.
Well, and what Spain was doing is not a very good business model because there's no sustainability. You know, once you run out, you run out.
Neither was the British. The problem, the Dutch model, which the British improved upon, was not. It would have been sustainable except for one small problem that's called competition. You have to have a monopoly on the seaways, and that just wasn't going to happen when your max population in the Netherlands was 2 million people, and obviously once the British got the 50-year head start in the Industrial Revolution, they're making ships faster and they were able to win the wars with the Dutch. But that's different. We'll get to that, I know. So I just didn't want to make sure you left off my Dutch buddies because I got a lot of fun stuff on there.
We'll get there eventually.
Right.
Eventually, and
I was afraid you were jumping ahead.
I will admit, there are a minor footnote in what I talk about because my emphasis is the British because it's I'm not saying that the Dutch weren't important in the whole game here, but ultimately it was about the British when it comes to these English colonies. But I get what you're saying. No disagreement.
I actually think the Dutch influence is much more significant and deserves more talking about than we give it credit for. Because
that's why I did a full show on them 2 weeks ago, Ron. So I completely agree. But let me just blend the two together. And I know, Doug, I'm probably jumping ahead, but I may not.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
So really what happened is, we get to the 1680s and the Netherlands, they've already peaked. They're just hitting their peak and they're on their way down. They're fighting the British all over the place. You get the Glorious Revolution of 1688 and William of Orange is married to Mary, who was the heir apparent in England. William of Orange sits on the crown of England and he brings over these great Dutch ideas like the stock market, the central banking system, the joint stock company, all these things that allowed England to absolutely thrive. He brought all these very modern Dutch ideas with him to England, implemented them immediately. In fact, anybody want to know what year Lloyd's of London was formed?
I want to say it's like 16. It was in the 1600s.
1688, same year William of Orange came over there. The Dutch were their stock markets. They were using derivatives. They're buying calls and puts. They were buying futures contracts. They were insuring everything. This is how they were able to finance all of these great mercantile ships.
Well, the stocks and that all of those financial instruments that were brought over by the Dutch at that point in time is literally the foundation for the existing financial system.
Well, exactly. The Dutch created it all. God gave it to England. England gave it to us. That's exactly.
And the reason why the Dutch and the British, though, it melded so well is because those ideas came from the same source.
But the
Saxons.
Not just the Saxon, it also came from Venice. The banking stuff did.
Okay.
So the combination of the two. And the other really important issue was what allowed the Dutch to get so far ahead was during the Reformation. They were open to people from other religions. They had religious tolerance. And so they weren't just Calvinists. You had, European Jews came. You had
a lot of that, and a lot of those reasons behind that was the Calvinist influence. But yeah, there was other reasons too. But
the Huguenots came there. You had a lot of people from that were being, persecuted in their home
Right.
countries by the whole Roman Empire, most of all, which is what Spain turned into about 50 years where Doug just left off. But the fact that they had such an open culture allowed for the free exchange of ideas, and that's where they were able to explode. And it really was a classic example of how a republic should be built with free exchange of ideas. And the reason they failed is a classic example because England followed the same blueprint of failure, and America's doing the same damn thing right now.
Well, Romanized Europe, which is, the French and the Spanish and all that. Also, what we began to see also was the classic vote with your feet situation, because you have a choice between, the tyranny of Romanized Europe or the systems of liberty that really came from the barbarians to the north. It doesn't take too much brain cells to figure out what to do. So it's interesting when you look at the migrations of the time too.
Well,
Yeah, it really is
I want to
fascinating.
say something about the financial system. The financial system that I believe that Trump and a lot of the world leaders are trying to implement today is basically a replacement of or an addition to and some pseudo replacement of that system that's 400 years old that has benefited the British.
Well,
Am
yeah,
I wrong?
it's a mirror of the
Actually,
British mercantilistic system for
actually
sure.
more of a question for Brady because I know this is his wheelhouse. And no disrespect, Doug. Am I wrong in what I said there?
No, it's about 90% close to how I would describe it. There's some caveats in there with the differences, but you can
Right.
roll with what you just said and have no problem. And to give Doug credit for a constitutionalist historian, he does his econ really well.
I don't disagree, but I'm just saying you're the guy.
I just
You're
want to give the guy props.
you're the Wall Street guy. So anyway,
Well, most people I got to correct on econ all the time. Doug, I rarely have to correct on that stuff.
Right.
So.
Well, it's fascinating to me that we literally are. I mean, because to me that is one of the biggest issues that we are facing today. Is
Well, I would agree. Ron, to answer you, the way I tell this, when someone asks me to tell real human history, one of the pillars of the whole conversation was our economic evolution. And I started with Venice, although you could go back to Rome if you want to. It's a little harder to trace. You start with Venice, they invent the dual entry banking system, the De Medicis, and they spread throughout Europe. Those ideas get to the Netherlands during the Reformation and the Renaissance. The Netherlands take the ideas to the next level. They do things like the Joint Stock Company, the Dutch East India Company, all that. Those ideas get to England. England bastardizes them, improves on some, screws up others. America takes that and runs with it. And we've, basically, we've turned into a mercantilist empire, which is what we weren't supposed to be. And we've been stretched too thin.
The very thing we fought a revolution against, we've become.
Right.
Yeah, well, and you end up with where they always fail is you get stretched too thin. You have too much debt. Your currency loses. We went from having the Dutch guilder being the reserve currency for the entire world to the Dutch guilder, the Dutch central bank being out of business in less than 3 years. And because they were cooking their books for 3 decades. And it's the whole thing we talk about with these very wealthy families. The first generation builds the wealth. Second generation sort of muddles around. And by the third generation, it's gone. The same thing happened. That's what happened to the Dutch Empire. They lasted 100 years, their glory days. But the glory days.
And that's kind of how I see, when I talk about, you guys have heard me use the analogy of the movie Miracle when the Russians were, they didn't know to pull the goalie at the last minute of the game because they'd never been in a situation where they were down with a minute to go. And so it's like I'm looking at that as the elite who basically make all the rules. They don't know how to play this game that is being pushed upon them because they've never had to play it, and it's all people have always.
And that's why they react, because they've never had to fight in that arena of ideas, and they react. But wait a second, you can't take this out of my hands.
Instead of dictating how we're doing it, now they're having other people that are bringing their ideas and they're having to react, and a lot of the mechanisms that they use to dictate are, Hegelian dialectic, where problem, reaction, solution, where they create the problem and then here's the solution, check this out, where it's already been kind of predetermined. Well, that isn't necessarily working like it used to, because now that we have Gutenberg Press 2.0 with the internet and the rapid exchange of information, even though it is a fifth generation warfare type environment where there's so much information that you can't really, sometimes you can't make heads or tails of what, there's still people who have discernment and can see through, and that, we are changing. The entire landscape of the world is in the midst of change.
Well, me being here has derailed Doug from the path he was going down. So let's turn it back to Doug and see if he can complete his story.
We're okay. And I wanted to say something that I do appreciate from Warhamster, stating my view of economic stuff. Because when he first started coming to my Constitution class, I started talking about mercantilism. I don't think you'd ever heard anybody else talk about it, right? Other than you.
Not too many.
And so he was like, okay, I like this guy. But we have really bought into the mercantilistic part of this, and mercantilism, all it is a kind of a fascism, socialism kind of combined. That's all it is. It's the same idea.
Why don't you
that's destroyed economies throughout history?
Brady,
so there's a fascinating. Ron, if I may.
I was gonna say, why don't you kind of give just like a 30-second synopsis of what mercantilism is?
Yeah, there's a really fascinating point about it. It ties right back to what Doug's doing with the differentiation between the Portuguese and Spanish empires and the English. One of the core tenets of mercantilism is there's a finite amount of resources on this planet, and your job as a nation state is to go out and gather it all and bring it home. And that's why the Spanish and the Portuguese were all about exploiting the resources, and the British kind of took it to another angle. And they said, well, we can increase the resources. This is where Thomas Malthus comes in and says, we have finite resources. This is the father of the whole global warming alarmism, is we have finite resources. But mercantilism, really, what it comes down to is crony capitalism. It can also be called fascism. It's basically when certain businesses that are closest to the power, or the crown back then, are able to influence the lawmakers and say, okay, look, we want you, we call it regulatory capture today, but make laws so that we can't get competition. It's a cartel system. You have a bunch of you have horizontal and vertical cartels, and they're making sure that they stymie competition. They have regulatory capture. They're making all the money, and they're basically the people right next to the crown. In America today, this is what the lobbyist industry is all about. The certain industries that once they've made it, they join up together, they lobby together, and they make sure nobody can come up and displace them. And
the legislature see it as a way to protect the interests of the country. They're not recognizing it for what it is. They just see it, we're making this relationship to protect the interests of the country, because it's a race to get what you can.
To me,
the key is elimination of competition.
It's the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules.
Yeah, well, there's the other one too. Do unto others before they do unto you.
Well, yeah, that's the other golden rule. I'm talking about the real golden rule that runs the world, and that's he who has.
Yeah, but in order for one to work, the other one has to be in play.
Sorta, maybe, but we have, and that this is what regulatory capture looks like. This is why you have the government, all these government agencies that let's take the FDA, for example. If you wanted to come out with a product that was going to compete with a pharmaceutical company, you would literally need to come up with an outlay of $50 to $100 million just to be able to pay the regulatory fees of the FDA to get into the market.
Exactly. And not only that, but do you want to talk about how that cartel was built? The Rockefellers decided to destroy anything that wasn't a petroleum-based pharmaceutical style of study of medicine.
Well, I wasn't really trying to go with that. I'm not trying to get into that. I was just trying to use that as an example.
Good example
of the mercantilistic system that is employed in the United States.
Final point on that, because this is a show about the Constitution, as always.
in history.
One of the many reasons that the colonists rebelled against England is because part of this mercantilist idea was they didn't want American businesses to rise up and compete against the British businesses. Without a doubt, that's why you got Stamp Act and Tea Act and stuff like that. But they also wanted anything produced in America, the wealth, to go back to England, which is, again, finite resources. We need to make sure we bring everything back home. So we can live in luxury and all of our colonies don't.
Sounds like the British have been meddling in foreign markets for centuries.
Yeah, they kind of suck.
They did with they did that with Germany. The true beneficiary of World War I was England. But
of course, and the one of the biggest losers was the Ottomans.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And by the way, the Ottomans were destroyed by the banks, not by the armies. We can do that in another show. I'll tell you about how the British bankers actually absolutely wiped out the Ottoman Empire with debt.
But I don't shed a tear over the Ottoman Empire being wiped out for numerous reasons.
I'm not crying too much either. But that being said,
well, and now look now look at the Ottoman. I mean, we kind of have a theoretical Ottoman Empire that is essentially like taken over Europe. So,
a little bit different. Yeah, Doug, to me, it's like when the British fight the Ottomans, it's like the Yankees and Dodgers playing in the World Series. I want them both to lose.
Unfortunately, one team has to win.
Yeah, well,
the Padres.
Yeah, the Padres will play the Yankees twice. Couldn't get past them. So,
yeah, well.
Oh no! I'm sorry. They played the Tigers the other time. My fault.
Yeah, 84 was Tigers. 98 was the Yankees.
The nice thing about history is it doesn't necessarily have to repeat itself.
No, but historians will always repeat each other.
This is true. I have found that out. Oh my God! It's like the telephone game, and they just history gets so freaking twisted and contorted. I find out new things all the time.
Yeah.
Now you're going to make me go down this Kalergi rabbit hole. So,
my favorite example to use in what you guys are talking about is Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb, historically, everybody just knows he was a jerk. And the reason why everybody just knew he was a jerk is because there was a newspaper reporter in the 1960s who wrote an article who was ticked off at him for over money, who decided to write an article about how he was a hated player and blah, 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 blah. And then when future historians and other writers began to write about Ty Cobb, they referenced that article. And before you knew it, you have an entire industry, an entire baseball community who believes that Ty Cobb was a jerk. And then someone decided to go to the original resources, the original
source
newspaper,
data,
stuff like that. And I'm sorry?
Yeah, source data.
Yeah, source data. And turns out that towns would celebrate when the Tigers came to town because they love Ty Cobb. He's the greatest player of the time, and so on and so forth. Everything that we knew about Ty Cobb, once we began to go into the source documents, was wrong. But it all started because one guy wrote something crappy, and everybody used it as their source. And before you knew it, an entire industry believed something that really wasn't true.
Crazy.
And so I like to use that as an example because it's a very good one, how they just become echo chambers of each other. And that's the reason I tell people 90% of my research doesn't come from secondary sources or something that some professor wrote or whatever. I try to go to original sources the best I can.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Ron said earlier when I mentioned AI. AI is the same thing as Google search or same thing as Wikipedia. It's a great place to start, and you ask them for the source data. You track. The only reason I like Wikipedia is it actually links up source data for the most part, and then you got to go find alternative reviews to that, and then you can draw your own conclusion. But that's exactly right.
Well, and if I may, what I'm trying to do in my network here is I am creating my own network, my own database based on source documents.
Yeah, we're gonna have to compare some notes very soon.
So when you
I can't let the hamster out of the bag yet, but I got some fun stuff to show you.
So when I'm asking my AI to look up stuff, I'm not asking it to look up its database, its approved database. I'm asking it to look up like, historians that maybe sometimes are fringe. But what I do is I try to put everything in there and then cross-reference, and then I feel like if you put everything in there from all different sides, you can get a much better, more robust picture.
Let me give you a great example of that, of what you guys are talking about. In that book I mentioned earlier, The Election of 1860, this is a very honest historian, and he decided he was sick of reading what other people said. So he went back and tracked down all of the articles in the newspapers that were written in the 1850s and 60s and listened to what the people that were there on the ground were saying at that time. He wrote the entire book based on newspaper clippings from the 1850s and 60s and didn't listen to a single historian.
Wow.
That's why I treasure that book.
Yeah, I've got that book sitting here somewhere. It's right behind me
You know,
somewhere.
the funny thing is that he has a ton of stuff that's available online for where you can find it in PDF or stuff like that. But that book is not available in PDF.
The Election of 1860?
It is not. I mean, I have it, and I'm gonna have to scan it. There's two books that I have that I'm gonna have to that I have to scan because I just can't find them. One of them is that one, and the other one um is the one by Laurent Guillon, who he's a French author, and he wrote about the how JFK was adamantly opposed to the nuclear program of the Israelis, and how the Israelis had a significant role in the assassination.
Well, the Israelis don't have a nuclear program, Ron.
No, of course not. No, that was the whole. I mean, that was when I saw the clip yesterday or 2 days ago where Kennedy comes out and he says, "Look, I'm absolutely in opposition to the expansion of the Israeli expansion idea. I don't want nothing to do with it, and I want and he sent that letter to was it Ben Gurion at the time, who was the first, and then Ben Gurion resigns." And then he has to start the process all over again. So, and I'm not naive enough to say that it was just the Israelis, but but certainly the Israelis had a beneficial.
They had a motive.
Yeah, they had a motive.
They may have had the
But
opportunity.
I mean, and there was no shortage of people with motives when it came to Kennedy. But I look at Kennedy as the original Trump in many respects, because
Jefferson was the original Trump.
well, okay, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about going that far back. I'm talking about in understanding the fight of the Leviathan that has its tentacles intermingled and intertwined with modern day government.
Again, Jefferson was that guy too. He fired half the bureaucracy because he understood.
Yeah. Well, of course, he inherited the Federalist bureaucracy from Hamilton, so he needed to fire him. But to Ron's point, and I've been telling you guys have heard me say this before, but I'll say it again for this show. And since World War II, we've had 4 presidents that have basically stood up against the military-industrial complex, the intelligence complex, and the foreign policy, the empirical foreign policy of the United States. The first one was Kennedy. They killed him. The second one was Carter, and basically he did the Halloween massacre, wiped out the CIA.
You think Carter did?
Carter stood up to them. He fired 1/3 of the CIA in the Halloween massacre, and that's why the CIA let the Iranians, take the embassy in 1971 and made sure the hostages weren't released until Reagan had been elected. The another guy who
I've not heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah, that absolutely happened. Look up the Halloween massacre. The CIA hated Carter, and everyone, again, once Reagan gets in with his vice president, former CIA head George H.W. Bush, all of a sudden the hostages come home immediately. So that happened.
Yeah, I mean that deal was brokered long before they.
Yeah, because it was basically said keep the hostages until Reagan gets in. That's what that was the deal. But also another guy who stood up to them was Nixon, and that's why they staged Watergate.
That's the one I was gonna say. So when you went to Carter, I'm like, what about Nixon?
Yeah, well, and then of course the fourth one is Donald J. Trump, who they've tried to kill and tried to impeach. But so there's 4 people in post World War II history that tried to stand up to this foreign policy complex, and Hopefully,
in varying degrees, I would say, in varying degrees.
Yeah, I mean, Nixon was CFR his whole life, but eventually I'm going to get into this.
He saw some of the light, and they hated him like they hated Trump.
He wanted out of Vietnam.
Watergate.
Yeah, he just won one of the biggest landslide elections in history, and part of it was because his willingness to bring troops out of Vietnam, and the military-industrial complex could not have that, so they stick the CIA on him. He didn't last long.
Yeah, it brings me to mind another book I have called "It Didn't Start with Watergate," but anyway.
Watergate's just an extension of the Kennedy assassination. Same people.
Yep.
Well, we actually had a pretty good dialogue today, but I don't think we even got remotely close to what we were supposed to talk about. So
no, I went through about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs worth of stuff.
You did? Okay, well, I stand corrected. So as long as you're content, Mr.
I'm always content because I get to be here and hang out with you guys. So that's a good thing. I mean, if it takes me 10 years to go through this, if everybody's learning something along the way, we're having good conversation. Because see, for me, the dialogue is important because if everybody leaves with just one thing that they learned that they didn't know before, it was all worth it. Whether it be what I planned or what he said or you said or whatever. And that's because that's the point of these shows, is to inform. And so if people are leaving, walking away going, oh, wow, that meant something to me, I didn't know that, I'm more than satisfied.
Well, I will try. I know I kind of slowed things down getting that third wheel in there, and I had to throw some points in there because
brother, you're always you don't ever have to trip on that. You're always welcome here because your contributions add a lot. So,
well, I'd like to try to make it more often. The good news is my wife just started a new job and she'll be traveling. She's out of town right now. She's in Philadelphia. So I will have more Tuesday nights available in the near future.
Philadelphia?
Yeah. So I will try to join you guys the next couple of weeks. I've got some travel of my own coming up. If I can make it, I will. Because I want this is a subject that's really near and dear to my heart, and I've been researching it pretty deeply. And I think I can add to what the narrative Doug's been spinning. I just have a couple different angles to come at it from, but I think it's a plus, not a distraction or a disagreement.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly.
So are you saying that when we don't see you on the air while she's on the road, Warhamster, you're all like William Wallace, freedom?
No, she's been gone for like 8 hours, and I miss her already, Doug.
Aww.
She'll be watching.
That's what my wife would say.
She'll be watching later, so of course I had to say that.
In that case, Alexis, we all love you very much. Thank you for letting us borrow your husband.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Doug, it's actually, you're lucky because now Virginia's totally dialed into your work and your shows. Alexis, she just wants to talk to me on the couch, and she wants to talk about. She didn't want to watch the show. She doesn't watch my stuff anymore. She goes, "Yeah, I've heard it all." Okay.
My wife's still learning. Of course, she's been reading quite a bit of stuff. So too, and now she's been reading enough and learning enough. Now I'm starting to give her the tougher stuff.
That's when the fun starts.
The Unseen Hand, and the Hamilton's Curse, and she's starting to read that stuff now.
My wife just recently told me that I'm too much of a normie, so I got my work cut out.
Oh, that's like that's a big deal.
Well, that's
you're too much of a normie.
Yeah, she's pretty dialed into most of she was there day one on the Q drops, and she's done her reading.
Wow, that's interesting.
My wife is still in learning mode, so she still respects me. But once she knows as much as I do, I'm in trouble.
Well, I don't have that problem.
Right.
So,
what about your cats? What about your cats, Ron? What do they think?
My cats are the most destructive force on freaking planet Earth. I'll tell you that.
So kneel down and say hello to Warhamster and Ron.
Hey, Virginia.
Hello, Virginia.
Yeah, they're saying hi. She can't hear you because you're in my ear, but they just told you hi.
Oh, tell them I said hi.
She's got her apron on. What? You getting ready to go back into the kitchen or what?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I swear my Bengals are, man, they are what they want, and they are powerful animals. Even though they're small, they are very powerful, and they want what they want. I come out, I've got this floor swept, everything is like neat and tidy, and I come out and from the night, and I open up the door in the morning, and it's like fucking chaos all over the ground. You got cat food everywhere, dry food spread all over the place, things knocked over. It's chaos. They are. I've heard that that Bengals were destructive, but I had never really. And of course, this isn't anything new to me, but not now. But it's just I marvel at how it's just done every single day. They're a lot of fun, but man, they're a lot of work.
Yeah, I like my dogs. My dogs are happiest when I'm at my desk. If I'm not at my desk, then they're like not sure what to do.
Yeah.
But so they're at my feet and they usually have their eye on me.
What's on tap for next week?
I love doggies.
What's on tap for next week, there, Mr.
Well, we'll get deeper into the formation of we'll get more into discovery, but then and we'll get more into the formation of the Spanish Empire, and then we'll start getting kind of into the Dutch and the English and
Spanish
all that.
Empire. You mean that empire, the portion of the empire that Mexico stole from them?
Now, the fun part about the Spanish Empire is when basically the seat of the Holy Roman Empire was in Spain, and that's really what starts the whole Dutch revolt. So that's the part I want to be here for.
Well, there's no shortage. There's no shortage of forks in that road. So,
no, it's and a lot of important lessons.
100% agree. So, well, on that note, guys, thanks for tuning in.
Always a joy. Always a pleasure.
And so anyway, I always appreciate everybody and look forward to seeing you next time. So have a great day, everybody.
Thanks for having me on, Ron.
Oh, you're always welcome, brother. Always.